I would give women this homework. The next time you're scrolling through and you see a woman do something or say something in your content and you find yourself in your body having a very visceral reaction to that, I want you to question why that is, what
Mm,
rule you feel like she's breaking, and where
mm.
you downloaded the message. That's the rule.
Welcome back. As we kick off the new show title, which includes the influencer effect, what better episode to do that with than with this one? We have Danielle Bayard Jackson. Danielle is a female friendship coach and educator. She is an influencer and talks to her many, many followers across social media platforms about female friendship. And she is the resident friendship expert for the global app Bumble. And she shares her insight weekly on the Friend Forward podcast. She has several viral TikToks videos, and she recently signed a book deal to bring her practical research-based strategies to the masses in May of 2024. And it is tentatively titled Fighting for Our Friendships. I cannot tell you how I have been fascinated by female friendship for a very long time. We do a lot of research at SheSpeaks regarding women and how women feel about their various friendships, how male relationships differ from female relationships. So this episode is chock full of insight from Danielle about how women think about those relationships differently. So I really enjoyed this conversation. If you have female friends and you are intrigued, as I am, with why those relationships are so important, I can say personally that the female friendships in my life have been extraordinarily important, a huge support system for me, and we're going to jump right into it. Here we go. Danielle Bayard Jackson, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so looking forward to this conversation.
All right, I need to talk to you about this topic you cover because I'm enamored. I have spent a lot of time thinking about female friendships, especially as I've gotten older. Talk to me about how you got interested in this space.
Yeah, it's so funny. I often joke that it certainly wasn't on my vision board when I was 10 to be a women's coach with their friendships. I actually started off as a high school English teacher, and I did that for 6 years. I was an academic chair as well, led the department. But between classes and after school, mostly my girl students would come to me and come to me with their friendship issues. And I didn't realize at the
Mm,
time I was coaching them through it, but that's what was happening.
mm,
And then I left that world to get into the world of public relations. And I thought, foolishly, oh, I'm leaving those teenagers, so I'm leaving that drama behind. And then I quickly learned that even dealing with these high achieving, charismatic, extroverted women, they too were secretly nursing pain around female friendship issues.
mm.
And long story short, I got certified to coach, and now I lean to my background as an educator. And now, for a living, I study what the research has to say about women's cooperation, communication, and conflict. And so far, it has been a really fun ride.
This is such a topic we hear about so often, especially from because we talk to so many female creators and
Mhm.
influencers. And I was just talking to someone the other day, and she was mentioning that a lot of the hate that because as a creator, as an influencer, people are going to comment on your content. That's
Yeah.
what they're going to do. And what this woman was telling me was that a lot of the hate she gets is
Mm.
from other women. And
Mhm.
I find that so astounding, just given how much progress we still need to make. What is going on? Why do we have such complicated female relationships?
So this is something I say in my book, which comes out next year, but whenever people say it's so complicated, why is it so complicated? We could answer that 100 different ways. But here's how I now respond to that. I looked up the word complicated in the dictionary, and it says the intersection of many parts.
Mm,
And so, by definition, female friendship is always going to be complicated because we're bringing
mm,
all of our stuff to the table. Even if
ugh,
we want to think we want to compartmentalize, we're bringing it all to the table. And so,
mhm.
I think with women, it's complicated because if I see another woman, it's like she mirrors me and she's a model for how I can be in this world. And there's
Sure.
just so much there. There's so much projection there, how she looks makes me think about myself. There's so much going on there because it feels like such personal business, a
Mhm.
conversation with another woman, a relationship
Mhm.
with another woman. And if we see it, a woman doing things as a mother online, but I wouldn't make that choice as a mom, or wait, is my choice as a mom wrong? So I'm coming down on her extra hard. Or if
Yeah.
I believe in dressing modestly and she's showing some skin, that stirs something in me because I'm playing by the rules. We're supposed to dress
Mm.
modestly. She's breaking the rules. And so
Mm.
I think there's so much stuff that is personal that drives some of that hatred and that heat, because it's coming from a very personal place.
You just made me think about something that I have not considered on this topic. And first of all, I'm grateful. So thank you for that. But what you were saying made me think that based on what I know about women, we do a ton of research on women. As women, we like to build consensus. We like to find
Mhm.
commonalities between
Yep.
ourselves. And
Yep.
that's a way that we build consensus. And it's interesting when you said that we almost look at one another as a reflection of what another woman does is a reflection on me because I am always in the back of my mind maybe trying to find the similarity and
Mm.
maybe that's why there's so much of a reaction when another woman does something that we think what like they shouldn't do that because we actually see them as almost like a part of us.
100%, like an extension of ourselves. And I know this sounds cheesy, but it is the truth. The more comfortable I've gotten in my own skin with how I look, with
Mhm.
some of my weaknesses, growth areas, the more comfortable and accepting I've become, the better my relationships with other women are. There's less judgment, there's less criticism, I'm less offended by things
Mhm.
that struck offense. And it's a cheesy go to answer about like work on yourself, but it has really made the way I view other women have more grace, understanding, compassion because you are me and I accept myself. And so you're so right. Like that wanting that similarity, we value egalitarianism, everybody's equal and the same. So if she's falling out of line, I can't relate to her or she's not playing by the rules of womanhood. So I agree
Mm.
with you. I see that as well. There's a lot of stuff under that.
Yeah. And it's almost like too that because of how we kind of function still in this patriarchy, it's just to a
Mhm.
great degree that we are almost like being taught from a young age to stay in line.
Yeah,
So when we see someone else stepping out of line, we have a reaction to that
totally.
or to what we
Absolutely.
deem as stepping out of line.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know people often use the phrase internalized misogyny, but I would encourage any woman who finds themselves I would give women this homework. The next time you're scrolling through and you see a woman do something or say something in your content and you find yourself in your body having a very visceral reaction to that, I want you to question why that is, what
Mm,
rule you feel like she's breaking, and where
mm,
you downloaded the message. That's the rule. I know
mm,
recently on TikTok, a video went crazy viral because a 29-year-old woman was talking about how much freedom she has in her life, not having children and not being married.
mhm,
And she did not come down on women who have chosen to be mothers. She
mm,
just said, "Man, let me tell you what life is like as a child-free woman. I can wake up at 10 and I can explore my hobbies on a whim." And I'm thinking, "Get it, girl. I've got 2 kids under 5." But I saw the joy and I was like, "Yes, girl. Love, appreciate this
mhm,
moment. Do your thing." Do you
mm,
know there were so many women in those comments saying, "Wow, how selfish you are. How insulting. You don't know real love until you have kids." It was insane, and it was coming from women, and
mm,
so I it did make me wonder, what did that strike in you? Is she not
mhm,
following the rules by not prioritizing being
mhm,
partnered and having babies? Is there space for a woman to choose that life and a woman to say, "I don't choose that life, and I love the life I've chosen?" So
mhm.
it brought up a lot of stuff.
Is it that as women, we are so emotionally tied to our decisions that we then feel this need to judge what someone else is doing?
Well, I'll just say in general, I think it's a great psychological task, just in general, to choose a path for yourself while also holding mental space that there could be another path that fits another person. It's like a
Yeah.
grand, like highly developed task to do in your brain. Okay, what I chose, it works for me. And I guess there's a completely alternate, sometimes contradictory path that works for this person. Now,
Mm,
sure, there are some things where we all universally across the board, okay, this might be a wiser thing to do than this. That's always going to be there. And yes, it's nice to be in community with people who share your worldviews. There's a certain ease, you feel affirmed. So that's true too. But I think that for women who are like, if you give your kids screen time. So, for example, we're pretty strict on screen time. And I'm
Mhm,
going to be vulnerable with you right now. I don't really post about that too much, about how we're
mhm,
strict with screen time, because I know there are going to be women in the comments like, okay, I don't care if my kid has 2 hours and I think you're being uptight, and let's not judge moms who. So, there are certain things, I'll keep it real with you, I have not shared
mhm,
because I know that women will think that I'm coming down on their choice. I'm just telling you why my choice works for me. And so I
mhm,
think it's just complicated in general, but I think especially with women, because we do, whether we admit it or not, often subscribe to the certain expectations and ideals that were constructed and presented by men in the first place of what it means to be a good, compassionate, pure, smart, sexy woman and to be all
mhm.
those things.
Like, it's
Yeah.
just not possible to be all of those things, but we do put that pressure on ourselves and therefore on other women. I just keep going back to that point that you made early on about how women connect and how
Mhm.
one of the key ways we connect is by seeing similarities
Mhm.
with other women. That's an important way that we do connect, and that being such a part of where a lot of this criticism maybe comes from, because we take it so personally. If I'm connecting with you because I see similarities and then you make a decision that is not something I would do, I'm going to take that much more personally than if I just decided that we were friends because actually I love that you're so different than I am and
Mhm.
that we are not the same. And I
Yeah.
just wonder if that's a shift that we as women can make in how we view our friendships.
It's interesting because I know maybe there's somebody listening who's skeptical. Let me make this clear. The research shows that men value similarities too, and that homophily is a sociological term for us congregating with people who are like us. So that's a human thing. We
Yep.
are attracted to people who are like us. That's a thing. But the areas in which we expect similarity are sometimes different. So, for example, for men, some of the predictors of intimacy or closeness in men's friendship include sameness in their financial status,
Mm.
sameness in, they call it competence, and status, social status. Now they're not walking around with this checklist, but those are the things they're looking for, a sense of sameness in other men to be their friends. This is probably because men's friendships circulate around shared activities, doing something
Mm.
together. And we can probably only engage in activities together if we have the same finances, because we can probably do the same activities, right? We can afford them.
Mm.
And also status is a thing, getting women. And again, I know people are like, you're generalizing. I'm not sharing anything that's not in the research. Okay. Getting access to women and connections and network and power. And so bonding with people who can give you access to those things. So status, financial status, things like that. They're looking for similarities in that way. And a lot of times, if they don't have similarities in other ways, they can still congregate. So maybe this guy has like different political leanings or faith or interests. But I'll still grab a beer with them. You'd be hard pressed to find a woman who I discover that we parent differently, have different political leanings, whatever else, and we're still grabbing a cocktail together. Doesn't mean I can't be nice to you, but I'm probably not calling you a friend because I expect us to have similarities in all these overlapping areas. For women, some of the predictors of platonic intimacy are sameness in the areas of education, dependability, personality, and humor. And this is probably because all of those things lend themselves to conversation. That's the bonding glue for us. For men, shared activities, they got to be doing something together. For women, it's conversation. So if we have the
Mm.
same kind of education, we can probably talk about the same things. If we have the same
Mhm.
personality, the conversation might flow in a certain way. If we have the same sense of humor, we're probably, there's a rhythm in the conversation.
Mm.
And so we really value similarity in those ways. But yes, for women, when we're dictating who we get close to or not, we feel a lot of that when there is a sense of sameness. That's why, and I'll end with this, if you overhear men talking, if they've met for the first time, it's nothing to hear them compete with one another. Oh, I ran 3 miles. Oh man, yeah, I used to run 3 miles a day, but I had to up it to 6, man. I'm now running 6 miles a day. It might be annoying, but it's whatever. If you hear women talking about, oh, you ran 3 miles, I ran six, that we all know that to be a cardinal rule. We're not trying to up one another in conversation because we all need to be the same. So if you
Yeah.
overhear women talking, we're probably saying more phrases like, me too. Same, girl, me too. Because
Yeah.
I'm like, "Ooh, I like her. She's just like me."
Mhm.
And sure, there are exceptions 100%, but these are tendencies that we have. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. I love that. I took so many notes on what you just said. And it just makes so much sense too when you think about, like, as you're talking, I was thinking to myself, I wonder if I think about friendships and relationships. I should say relationships is a broader category,
Mhm.
but relationships with women in the work environment as
Mm.
different than the relationships I have with women in my personal life.
Mhm.
Because in a work environment, maybe it is a bit more like the men
Mhm.
are because the infrastructure is designed like
Right.
it's like it feeds into that status level, things like that, right?
Mhm.
That's more of what it is.
Yeah.
And versus your personal friendships, are do you see differences in terms of how women view relationships with other women at work versus relationships with other women in their personal lives?
Yeah, totally. And could you find friends in the workplace? Yes, I always encourage that. One reason we found a lot of friends back in the day at schools because we simply spent so much time together. So as an adult, the next blessed place where we're spending so much time together is work. Why not find
Mhm.
friends there? So yes. However, yeah, there is this other character in the background at work, which is just the workplace. And this is the source of my livelihood and my income. So do these other people in a certain way have the potential to disrupt that? If a girl says something to me in a meeting, was that shade or not? And what's interesting is women often get a rep for being competitive, but men are too. In the workplace, we all are. That's a human thing, is
Mhm.
to compete for resources. So we're all
Mhm.
doing it. So you're always on alert. Did they about it in a meeting at work? Are they saying something? Was that intentional to make me look bad in front of the boss? So there's some of that there. If I share with her that I struggled with this project, did I just make myself vulnerable? Can she tell somebody else that I struggled? So there's some of that at play, sure. And there's something unique about friendships where it's a space where it's a completely voluntary relationship. So we don't have anything else forcing us to be in this space. I choose you because I like you. So I think
Mhm.
maybe from that particular origin to begin with shapes it in a different way.
Yeah. So let's shift a little bit to the fact that you have built such a great following on social media. You talk a lot about relationships, female relationships on your social media on TikTok. I saw a bunch of content that you've had. I know a lot of your content has gone viral. Can you talk a little bit about what you are sharing with people on social media?
Yeah, I'm wondering if the reason it does resonate with so many people is because I often get the feedback of, "Oh my god, you're in my head. You're in my head." And I think it feels that way because I'm regurgitating back to them and I'm using their comments as the ideas for the next video. So Danielle's
Mm.
not in a corner somewhere thinking of all these ideas of what I want to talk about. I'm using what you told me. So I like data and things like that. So I'll look in the comment section. If there are 80% of the comments are around this one thing, it's ooh, okay, let's talk about that. I go
Mhm.
live on TikTok every Monday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at the Friendship Expert on TikTok, and we have class. We have a
Mm.
workshop and they determine what we're going to talk about and we get into it. And I
Wow.
learn a lot. So in the comments, they're responding to me like, oh, but what about this? And I'm like, oh, that's a good point. I didn't think about that. I didn't think
Mhm.
about that. And so it really does feel like it takes me back to the classroom where I'm sharing a lesson with my students who are 18 years old. And I'm thinking, here I am sharing all the good stuff, but they have questions. They poke holes. They point out an area
Mm.
that I didn't introduce. And I'm like, oh, that's a good point. Okay.
Mhm.
So it keeps me in the, as a student to some degree. And we also have permission to experiment. We're having dialogue. So I think the reason it's doing so well is because the whole account is a dialogue about women's friendships. What are you going through? They're tagging me in videos about women's friendship. So again, it looks like the stitch that I'm doing is really timely. That's because 10 people tag me in the same thing saying, "Oh, Danielle, what do
Mm.
you think?" And so
Mm.
I see it as an ongoing conversation. And I believe that's
Mhm.
the reason why it resonates with so many people.
And the fact it's the thing that I have heard many successful creators and influencers talk about, which is the value of listening to your audience. And
Yeah.
that's what you're doing. So you have an area of expertise and valuable information you can share, but you also listen to what
Yeah.
your audience is reacting to and what they want to know. And that kind of helps you create the next piece of content.
Yeah, that's definitely like the strategy is, okay, what are we talking about? What are the questions? Okay, let's talk about that. Good point. Let's talk about that. So that's definitely my
Mhm.
approach. In terms of content, I think the reason why it resonates is because I think, when we talk about niching and things like that, my opinion is, it's just as important to be clear on what you don't talk about as what you do. And so, yeah, I talk about women's friendship, but when I started, it was friendship in general. And then I
Mm.
realized, like, oh, I don't enjoy talking to men about friendship. That's just me. I don't enjoy it. It's not fun. Okay. I'm not entertaining some of these silly questions. I'm not doing it. So I took that off the board. And then it was like,
Mhm.
you know what? Children's friendships are different because these are very formative
Mhm.
years. I'm not going to touch that. And then
Yeah.
I thought, oh, when we talk about friendship, the 55 plus community, are they finding some valuable content in there? They are. But I'm not going
Mhm.
to pretend I can speak to them too because they have unique circumstances. Their
Yeah.
kids are out of the house. Maybe they've divorced. Maybe a spouse has passed. So they have unique circumstances. So I got really clear on this is for mostly older Gen Z, millennial women, because we're at the same time going through stuff like selecting a bridesmaids, having your first child, deciding to
Mhm.
be child free. We're in that space. And so I
Mhm.
think being very specific to who I'm talking to and what I don't talk about has been helpful.
Mhm.
I don't often talk about mental health stuff. I
Mhm.
refuse to talk about narcissism, gaslighting. That's not a conversation over here. That's
Mhm.
for a mental health professional. So I
Mhm.
think people know I'm getting very specific information for my particular group in this space. And then the last thing I'll say is for me, I like leaning into the research. So I'm not saying what Danielle thinks you should do, which I think some people might find relief in. It's not
Mhm.
like, so I went with my girlfriends this weekend, and here's what I think you should do 3 tips because this worked for me last year. I'm not doing that. You don't want me to
Mhm.
do that. Trust me. Okay. It's nice to
Mhm.
say, oh, I see we're all struggling with this. Thankfully, here's what the research says about that. So let's keep having this conversation. I'm
Yeah.
not vilifying people. 9 signs your friend's toxic. We don't do that over here. It's very healthy, actionable, and we're
Mhm.
hearing both sides and trying to be compassionate to people on both sides of a friendship issue. And I
Yeah.
think maybe people find that to be something a little bit fresh.
Yeah, it is. And the positivity I think is also so good because there is so much negativity out there on
Mhm.
social as some of the topics you just pointed out that people like will talk about for sure, but also to bring that approach of hey, we're here to be productive. That's the
Right.
approach we're taking. That's your brand. That becomes part of your brand.
Yeah.
Do you see differences in I know you said you don't necessarily cover all generations, but maybe like Gen Z, the millennials, Gen Y, and then Gen X. I think you said you cover those to a great degree. Do you see differences in how female friendships are approached across those different generations?
I do. I
Mhm.
do.
Tell us.
Yeah, so it's so interesting. I think in terms of what we expect from friendship, and so I've noticed that older generations expect that we are spending time together and that I'm
Mhm.
calling you and we're
Mm,
talking on the phone. So
mm,
maybe the friendship experience, there's a certain expectation of what that looks like. I know for
mhm,
Gen Z, especially growing up on technology, it's normal that we maybe are interacting mostly through sending fire emojis on our stories. And if you posted something, was that kind of like a shade at me? That post, I'm trying to read her subtext.
mm,
So there's a lot of distraction, I want to say. And I think Gen Z also is quicker to have conversations around, they're quicker to expect that if I have an issue with a friend, should I cut her off? I'm cutting her off
mm,
because she did this thing
mm,
that's obviously not okay, right? So I'm cutting her off and I need friends who like get me. And there's a lot of that language. So I think it's new for them to hear, okay, yeah, anybody you enter into a friendship to is going to disappoint you. So let's have a
mhm,
conversation around how to have hard conversations because cutting everybody off to me is indicative of a lack of conflict resolution skills. So let's talk about
mhm,
that. So for a lot of them, it's not even a thought, an option. But I don't mean to like insult, but for many of them, it becomes like not a thought to sit down and be like, hey, can we talk about what happened last night? Because I don't know how to take what you meant. So help me understand. Is not even an option in the brain. But for
mm.
older generations, they're like, yeah, I'm going to invite her over for coffee and we're going to talk about. And so there's certain differences in terms of communication, I think, and expectations. But the universal thread that brings us all together is we all want to feel safe and supported by women who we consider our people. We're all hungry for that and want to know how to achieve that.
Yeah, I just am also wonder if like younger generations value female friendships in a way that maybe older generations of women don't. Just
Mm,
because it has to me it seems like we are in an era of young women really saying, "Look, I'm going to focus on my female friendships. Yes, I can have a great romantic relationship, but
mhm.
I also find so much value in these female friendships and these female relationships. And I wonder if, like older generations, we were so much more focused on you find a spouse, you get married, you have the kids. Like it was much more of this is what you do. And younger generations have maybe more possibilities in terms of how their life, it's not as clear cut how things are going to go.
I'm so glad you brought that up because you're absolutely right. And I hope Gen Z is not listening like, wait, so maybe the experiences we have for the expectations we have for our friendship experience or the way we communicate looks different. But I have certainly noticed that younger generations certainly prioritize friendship in a different way. Now, again, there are some people, no matter where you fall in the generational line, who are like, hey, my friends come first. But
Mhm.
just generationally, like more holistically, you do find younger people talking about like, hey, I'm going to buy a house with my friend. Hey,
Mhm.
I'm going to travel and put off having children because me and my friends are going to go live in a commune. Like you see it being more of a conversation around my girl is number one. Okay. And
Mm.
which I think is refreshing. I think it's
Mhm.
refreshing because there are downsides to coming up during a time when people are pressuring you to find your person. And I know there's still some of that today, but every holiday, it's like, why aren't you married yet? Why aren't you married yet? There's so much cultural pressure to be partnered. And then
Mm.
once you're partnered, that marriage to look a certain way in the home. And now you should
Mhm.
be wife and you should be satisfied because
Mhm.
you've got the trophy. You're married with kids. Shouldn't you be satisfied? And so I think I'm so glad for the conversation around, wait a second, what role does friendship play in our lives? And I don't think I want to put my friendships on the back burner. I think I want to make that priority. Number one for me is building healthy friendships with intention. And so I'm so glad there's more of that dialogue publicly. Yes.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the role of a female friendship coach. What does a female friendship coach do and why is this type of work important?
I think the work of friendship, especially like friendship education, is important because there has for too long been an attitude of the extent of the public discourse is you either have friends or you don't. And if you don't, what's wrong with you? And when you have an attitude like that, it leaves a lot of room for people to feel shame.
Mhm.
And not to be dramatic, but if especially for women, because people believe women are naturally communal. You just got a lot of friends. And if you don't, what's
Mhm.
wrong? What's wrong with that? So
Mhm.
there might be shame around, God, I've had two friendships dissolve in 6 months. What's wrong with me? Or
Mhm.
man, okay, I have a lot of friends, but like I don't feel really satisfied, but I guess I should be grateful because I have friends.
Mhm.
There's so much that you deal with privately because people aren't having the conversation publicly. You just see people on Insta and TikTok like with a bunch of pictures of themselves on the boat for their friend getaway. And you're like, what? I'm glad there's more of this research and education in the forefront to normalize what are typically
Mhm.
private, maybe shameful, embarrassing experiences. I know, especially my high achieving women who are big creators. I know I made friends with a creator who has a massive following. We went to dinner and I remember her talking to me about how she feels a little embarrassed because everything else looks like she's got it together and she's paid to look like she's got it together. That's the brand. So
Mhm.
who do you go talk to about like actually I feel very lonely or actually I
Mhm.
feel like I've outgrown my friends, but like how the heck am I
Mhm.
supposed to make new friends in my
Yeah.
40s? And so there's so much private shame around that, especially as a woman who's known for doing all the things. Why can't you get this area of your life? What does that say
Yeah.
about you? And so I think
Right.
a lot of the normalizing is really helpful. And then finally, I think it's important because people need to know that you can construct, you can build healthy friendships. It's not like the script we were using to make friends at 10, it would be inappropriate to try to fit that at 35. It can't be the same script. So how are we deciding on friendships now? Before it was just shared interests when you were 15. Oh, we do the
Mhm.
same things, we're in the same class. That's not sufficient. Now we want
Right.
people who affirm our worldviews, who can offer us a sense of support for some complicated things,
Yep.
and it looks different. So I think
Mhm.
knowing what the research says, knowing there are strategies that you can do to have more satisfying friendships is important.
I'm very curious about your perspective on this, given all of the research that you've spent time looking at. I have always found it really interesting that sometimes as women, we will almost vote against our own like
Mm,
people, our own our own sex, in the
mhm.
sense that here we are in a situation where now Roe v. Wade has been overturned. It was the law of the land for 50 years. And a lot of women voted for people who were in favor of making this this was a process of getting Roe v. Wade overturned,
Yeah,
right? So a lot of women had to vote almost like against their own personal interests there.
yeah.
Like how do you think about that? Are there things that like as women we prioritize for ourselves that maybe sometimes we're overriding our own personal interests in what we think is for maybe a greater good? I don't know. I'm very, as you can tell, like I'm not clear on how things like this happen.
Yeah, I'm not either. And I wonder if there are just so many things at play here. I don't know if, again, like what we talked about earlier of what we think is appropriate or respectable or the right thing to do, despite maybe sometimes missing the human element. And maybe that's what it is, getting caught up in the word escapes me now, but like getting caught up in forgetting the word, but like appropriateness or respectability or what a woman
Mhm,
should be doing and what's idealistically right or whatever.
mhm,
And sometimes we just miss each other as people. I think we miss the human element. So certain
mhm,
laws that are being placed and all that. I think we forget to picture, okay, when this affects an actual person with
mhm,
two eyes and a heart, like a real woman in
mhm,
my neighborhood, what does
mhm.
that mean? I don't know. I just my general prayer is that we can stop missing each other as
Yeah.
the person, the woman who this is going to impact in for real life. What
Mhm.
are the implications of this decision you're about to make? And I think we miss it. Maybe we're distracted with other things. I don't know what those things are, but I hope we get it together.
Let's, if we can, just quickly shift to talking about you've built a following on social media. People really want to hear what you have to say about these topics. They come to your TikTok, your Instagram to engage with your content. How do you think about that as a responsibility? The fact that you influence how people, your content can influence how people think. How do you take that on as a responsibility?
Wow, that's a really powerful question because I think for so long I resisted those two labels like influencer, oh my gosh, no, or creator, no, I'm an educator. I'm not, I've
Mm,
resisted for so long and it's like, well, I guess by definition, yeah, that's what's happening here. And I think what has helped me to stay focused and to do what I feel like is responsible is to still pretend that there are only 25 followers.
mm,
I had so much fun with Instagram when I started. It was fun. I was talking about what I was wearing. Like it was fun. And I'll be real with you, the bigger the numbers get, you do start entertaining different thoughts before you post because now
mhm,
you're aware that there might be other people in the room and then you're
mhm.
calculating, okay, I need this post to be good because I'm trying to signal to this brand that there's all of that. So I just have to get back to what was fun for me at the beginning. I think this is interesting. So I'm going to
Yeah.
post it. Or I think we're having these conversations in the DM. So I'm going to pull it to the forefront. I think this is interesting. And as far as keeping a certain integrity, there are certain things that are just my brand and I just hold fast to them. And I've been very tempted sometimes by certain brand partnerships. And I'm just like, I just can't. I think I see it as, hey, we worked really hard to get here, all of us, to have this space
Mhm,
and all that. And so I've gotten offers to partner with people who, with brands that are having me promote certain products that I'm like, ooh, that looks very tempting, but I don't know. I don't know that I want to push that on people. And
mhm,
also want to maintain their respect and trust. And I think if I start saying, like, all right, ladies, get this deal, and they're like, Danielle, you've never even talked about this world before. I don't want them to feel that way. I don't ever want them to be surprised. I don't ever want them to
Mhm.
feel like, "Wait, what's going on?"
Right.
Ever. So I'd rather pass on it so that they feel safe here, like, I know what I'm gonna get when I come here. Or if
Mhm.
it's a product I don't use myself, I would never. And
Mhm.
so I think saying no to those things helps it to stay safe, and there's something safe about what's familiar. And sure, we'll experiment and do different things and have fun, but you know what you're gonna get. I try
Mhm.
not to, this is just for me, my brand is I try not to curse, I'm not talking about getting wasted, I'm not vilifying people like how those girls get when I don't do that, because
Mhm.
whatever those girls are, I've probably been that girl if we're keeping it real,
Mhm.
and that girl's probably following. So we
Mhm.
try to keep it like positive, informative, safe, clean. You could share the video maybe with your 13-year-old daughter. And so anybody who asked me to promote something or partner with them, and I feel like it would take us away from that, I have to give a quick no because I don't want to think about it too long, to be honest, and start to
Mhm.
justify it. So I tell myself if the first thought when I'm reading that email is like, wait, what? It's a no. Don't even let
Mhm.
myself settle in and think it could be like a good connection. Nope. It's a no.
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't trust myself.
No, good for you. That goes back to what I was saying before. It's clear to me that you have a very good perspective on what your brand is, and then that dictates what you're willing to do and what you're not.
Yeah.
Versus somebody who maybe doesn't have a clear perspective on their brand, you fly in the wind a little bit in terms of not having a great way to make decisions. As a female creator and influencer, do you think that there are specific challenges that female creators face that maybe male creators don't?
Oh, sure. And I think it goes back to what you were mentioning earlier about the way we judge one another.
Mm,
And I think even in choosing what to wear for a video, is this too low cut? Is it
mm,
not? Is somebody going to comment? Especially when you're heavily on social media, it's they're already anticipating comments in real time of
mm,
creating the video, which is sad.
mhm,
I think they need to like research that, like what it does to your brain, honest
mhm,
to God. But I'm thinking,
mhm,
is this too low cut? Even though I think it's fine, but
mhm,
is somebody going to say something about that? My hair, I've gotten comments on my hair, certain styles, which is like a whole other thing about not liking certain things I didn't ask. And also the video has nothing to do with my hair.
mhm.
I don't see men having to think twice about this shirt, this hair.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. My confidence, which at this point I don't care, but when I started, it was like if I say my credentials before saying something, I think I'm doing that to make you comfortable. I want you to know, okay, Danielle's telling me something that she's researched. Okay, I can trust her.
Mm,
But I've said my credentials before and had people say, whoa, okay, like really feeling yourself, or like, wow, you don't have to like brag about it. Just give us the information. You don't have to like brag about and it's, oh, I was doing that so you can feel comfortable that this is not a random fact that I made up. And then, especially as a Black woman, I personally feel like I've been challenged more than other groups would be. I've shared research and had mostly men, which I'm thinking, why are you here? But I've had mostly men who will say, and where was that study? Where did you get that? I'm not even kidding. Over my like 5 years of doing content around this, I would say of the few comments I've gotten of people asking, where did you get that from? Uh, I would say 99% of them were men in the comments saying, where did you, okay, and where was the study? Can you drop the link to the study? Where did you hear that? And it's just like, wait, why do I have to explain where I got it from? You see the credentials in the bio. I shouldn't have to follow every sentence with a citation. So sometimes I will just to show people, like, oh, yeah, if you want to check it out for yourself. But on the times I don't, there will be a man who's in there saying, where did you get that from? Where did you hear that? So there's a lot of things to think about. My hair, my shirts, my backup for my citations, other groups do not have to think about.
Danielle, I have heard that from other female
Mm,
creators before. I had actually the episode that we just released this week. I had a female finance influencer
yeah.
who was joking, not joking, but like telling me that when she started her account, her blog, all of that, she wasn't even a mom at that point. Yet people
Mm,
referred to her as like a mom influencer, a mom blogger, a mommy blogger. And she's, I don't like, where do they just need to bucket us? And then the other thing she mentioned is that as a finance influencer, she can be quoted right next to a guy with less experience, but then people are questioning her credentials and not
yeah.
his.
Yeah, totally.
What's
It's
that
ridiculous.
about? What is that about?
It's crazy. I know. I know.
So that totally resonates what you're saying about
Yeah.
people. Also, we've heard a lot of women say that as creators, they are talking like they talk about travel or whatever, and they do a video and people are commenting on their appearance. And like, my
Yeah.
video had nothing to do with my appearance,
Mhm.
yet everyone feels entitled
Yeah.
to jump in and talk about my appearance. So a lot of that sounds like it's a very kind of consistent experience that female creators have, that maybe men don't get that same treatment.
Yeah, totally.
What are you most excited about? Like, which platform are you most excited about, and what's coming up next for you?
Yeah, I don't know. I use my platforms differently, so maybe that's why I know people have opinions on those spaces, but for Instagram, I use it really to, like, nurture. So I'm gonna share more about a game I did with my kids, or I feel comfortable being more silly and I've got my bonnet on at night and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you guys." So I feel a little more comfortable being myself. I know people say the opposite, but for me,
Mm,
Instagram is where I can be silly in stories or whatever. For me, TikTok feels very branded, not as the platform, but how I started showing up. Now people expect that. And when you think about the algorithm, so for me, I'm always wearing a blazer and giving a fact over on TikTok to
mm,
keep the algorithm consistent. But on
mm,
Instagram, not worried about growing. I just am trying to have a good time with the people there. And so maybe I feel more free to talk about things that aren't in the niche. And that's my approach. So I really like them for different things. TikTok, I like seeing what's going viral and then seeing how that inspires articles and then articles inspire conversation. I get excited when I do a video and then a journalist comes in my email and they're like, "Okay, we loved your video that went viral. We'd love to do a story on it." And it's like, what? So to see how these conversations are being had is really cool.
mhm,
And then in 2024, like in terms of moving forward, I think I'm really excited about being more like experiential. Like, how do we bring this experience of following along on social to real life? I'm not
mm,
much of an events girly because it brings me a lot of stress, like dealing with vendors. But because of the nature of what I talk about, maybe we're talking about friendship and connection. My people are very hungry to do it. Oh, yeah, that's
mm.
great. So, where are we meeting up to do this? And I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. So, we did it once. I just was experimenting. We did a big event here in Tampa and we had a speed friending component and I spoke. It was amazing. And so now we're looking forward to when my book launches next May. We're looking forward to, instead of a dry traditional book tour where you're reading like 2 pages and people clap for you, which feels good, sure. But it's no, how can we make an experience? How can we travel around the
Mm.
country, pick a couple cities, and we're just having a good time?
I
That's
love
the focus
that.
in 2024 is bringing the social experience to in real life.
Oh my God, I love that. I love that. Danielle, thank you so much for spending this time with us today. If people want to follow you and learn more about the great advice you're sharing, what is the best way for them to do that?
So everything lives at betterfemalefriendships.com. And I thank you for facilitating a moment to have this conversation because it's important to have it with a certain level of intellect and nuance is so important. And you have asked such thoughtful questions. And I know your listeners are smart women who want to get it done and they want to have like great content and they're thinking of the business of influencing. And so this is such an important part of that conversation. I thank you for allowing me to lend my voice to it.
Thank you for being here. I am so grateful. You've made me think about so many things in different ways, which is exactly why we have these conversations. So, Danielle, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you for listening. If you're an influencer or a brand that wants to work with us, please feel free to email us at info@shespeaks.com. Until next time.